Hello and welcome to today's JCESR webinar. This is Michael K. Waters, the newish internal communications specialist for JCESR. We're at the Argonne National Laboratory site, and today I'm very pleased to have present Chris Kramer, Manager of Media Relations and External Affairs at Argonne National Laboratory. This is truly a special webinar. Chris is an expert in communication, working as media spokesperson, building entire communication programs, and has a broadcast news career that has spanned 10 years, 5 states, and made contributions to local, national, and international news media. As we come upon our summer series for the JCESR webinar, we're going to look to present new types of subjects and find new approaches for those subjects. Any feedback you have from today's webinar or any ideas that you have for future webinars, please feel free to forward those ideas onto the JCESR Ops email account, and we'd be happy to hear from you. Without further ado, I'm now turning it over to Chris Kramer.
Good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Chris Kramer. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you today. As was mentioned, I'm the Manager of Media Relations and External Affairs here at Argonne National Laboratory. I've been doing this for a long time. I actually started out many years ago as a disc jockey of all things. Yeah, I'm old enough to have actually spun vinyl. So been doing this a long time and really enjoy this. And I hope that some of the material that I give you today will help you to be better at communicating what you do, communicating your science, communicating all the different things that we need to talk about so that we can engage people, get the public excited and interested, bring about research connections, and hopefully bring in more money, because that's always a bonus right there too. So the presentation today, your presentation improved, here's how. I have to tell you, this was not the original name for this presentation. When I actually came up with it, it was called Your Presentation Sucks, Here's How. But unfortunately, there were some folks who thought you couldn't handle the word sucks, and I think you can. We're okay with that, right? So anyway, here's the presentation. Your presentation sucks, here's how, and we're going to talk about how we can improve how you communicate what you do in different situations. Now, we've all been there, right? We've been in a lecture hall, in a stadium, in a conference, anything like that, where you've got the speaker in front or on stage and they're droning on and they're clicking through incomprehensible slides. You can't read them. You can't understand the person. They're turning around. You're literally falling asleep. Well, here's the thing. We don't want you to be that person, okay? There are approximately 20,800 PowerPoint presentations given at any minute around the world. And of course, the vast majority of those actually suck. I made that number up. I got to admit that. I don't know how many there are, but there's a lot, right? Here's the thing. Don't blame PowerPoint. Don't blame Keynote or Prezi or any of the tools that we use to help us with our presentations, okay? They're just tools, okay? It's the speaker who sucks. And quite frankly, we want you not to suck when you're doing a presentation or communicating what you do. So here's why your presentation sucks. I'll tell you right out front, okay? First of all, lack of proper preparation. If you're not spending a lot of time preparing for doing that presentation, for talking to people, to presenting your information, you're going to get in trouble there. Not knowing who the audience is or what your goal is can also get you into trouble. Not practicing. Practicing is one of the most important things you can do. I know a lot of people, they put a presentation together, they don't practice it. They're not going to do well. You have to practice again and again and again. Another big problem is too much information crammed into your visuals. They're too dense with information and you can't read them or can't really use them. It doesn't help you to tell your story, so to speak. And of course, just bad visuals can really pull away from what you're trying to communicate. So, presentations are ultimately about communicating information. If you just want to do a data dump and put a bunch of facts out there, send me a report. I'll read it later, okay? Communication, of course, is hard. Any type of human communication is a challenge. Anytime we're trying to communicate any type of information, there are many filters that come into play. It can be past experience, cultural filters, our predisposition to gravitate toward information that already supports our worldviews that we already hold. There are lots of things that make things challenging when it comes to human communication. And you think we'd be kind of good at this, because a lot of studies say that We spend about 70% of our waking day in some form of communication, whether it's talking, listening, reading a billboard, reading a text, emails, things like that. We spend a lot of our day in communication, but we're not very good at it many times. And here's part of the problem. We're not trained for it most of the time, especially those of us in the world of science and technology. Especially when we get into college, we are trained to communicate in a certain way. We write papers, we put together thesis statements. We're told that we give kind of like the backstory on it, supporting details, and then conclusions at the end. And that really doesn't work when you're doing a presentation in front of groups, no matter who you're talking to. We have to kind of reverse that, okay? So we have to unlearn those things and move in a different direction when we're trying to communicate face to face in front of people, whether it's folks we're going for, maybe talking to potential sponsors, presenting a paper at a conference, teaching a class. There are many ways to this. We need to change the way we do our communication. So how do you fix this? Well, first of all, you got to know your audience. Second, know the goal. What do you want to achieve with your communication, with your presentation? You've got to organize your information in a way that makes sense to people. You need good supporting materials. And of course, you need to practice. Now, knowing the audience is really important. You need to find out who you're talking to, what they know, what they don't know, what they're hoping to get out of it. Ultimately, you need to know what's in it for them. You have to turn it around. Many times when we're giving a presentation, we're so focused on what we're trying to say, what we're trying to get out there, or we're trying to look really smart to other people that will just dump a bunch of data onto them. But really, ultimately, we need to think of it from the audience's perspective. That's the first thing you want to do. What's in it for them? What are they going to take away from this? So you need to think about it. And there's that old acronym, WIFM, what's in it for me? Put yourself in the place of the audience. And audiences vary. There's a few that I've listed here on the slide that you can kind of use as a model maybe. Obviously, policymakers are looking at things from, does it support or refute legislation? Do my voters care about it? Things like that. Businesses ultimately want to know, does it solve a problem or make money for them? Interestingly enough, I was at a party recently, and there were a bunch of high-tech entrepreneurs at this party. I don't know how I got invited. I was in the wrong room or something like that. But as I was talking to them about Argonne and just some of the stuff we do out here, and was talking about communication, and one of these high-tech energy entrepreneurs from South America said, I get the same problem. He goes, people come to me with ideas and they want to tell me the details. They want to tell me the science behind it. They want to go on ad nauseum about the research. He goes, I don't care about that. He said, I just want to know, how is this going to help my business and help me make money? So again, you got to put yourself in the mindset of the audience. Obviously, non-governmental organizations may want to know, how does it fit within their agenda? Other scientists, does it relate to their work? Is it groundbreaking? The media wants to know, is it news? Will it sell ad space or make people want to watch or read? And the public, the big question is, what does it matter to me, the public? How does this make my life better? Does it make me go, gee whiz, that's really cool? Is there a human connection? So again, think of it from the audience's perspective when you're putting something together. What is it that they want to get out of this? Also, know your goal in all of this. You've got to have a goal when you're speaking. I kid you not, I've had this happen a couple of times. I'm helping to prepare some of our leadership or researchers here at Argonne to go give a presentation at a conference or something. And I'll say, by the way, what are you trying to accomplish? What's your goal of going to this conference and speaking? And then they'll look at me blankly and they go, well, they invited me. Well, yeah, but what's your goal in speaking? Well, they invited me. If you don't have a goal, don't do it. What is it you want people to do? Obviously, a lot of this stuff boils down to wanting people to change the way they think about something, increasing awareness about something, changing an action about it. There are many things, many goals you can have, but you need to really identify those goals before you put together your presentation or even accept the invitation to speak. Getting organized is also very important. You need to have a system to organize your ideas. And there's a lot of them out there. It's not just as easy as opening up the PowerPoint, starting to throw stuff on the screen. There are ways you can organize your information. Now, again, traditionally in the world of academia, science, technology, we are trained from an early age, early in our careers, that the way you organize your thoughts are you have background for the issue, supporting details, and then results and conclusions. That's pretty much how you put together a paper, right? When you're doing a presentation, you have to flip it all around. You have to change it up a little bit. You got to go straight for the bottom line. Start out of the gate with, what is this? What is the bottom line on this thing? Then the so what factor for people, and then you give the supporting details. So you need to reorganize it a little bit, flip it around. That's how you organize your information. Another great tool that I encountered out of a book called Escape the Ivory Tower is something called the message box. This is a wonderful way to frame information. Obviously, framing information is putting it in a context that makes it easier for people to understand. So this is one frame you might be able to use. First of all, you start out with, what's the issue? What is the issue that we're talking about here? What are the problems associated with the issue? Comes next. What are potential solutions to those problems? What are the benefits of solving those problems or those solutions? What are the benefits of the solutions? And of course, don't forget the so what factor. So what? What does it mean to people? Why should people care about it? So that's one of the tools that you can use to help frame your information. I'll give you a little side note here, okay? If you're going to do a 1-hour presentation, if you've got a 1-hour period you need to speak for, you should be spending about 30 hours preparing for that presentation. Now, I know that seems like a lot, but ultimately it is, starting out with the research, gathering your information, starting to build your presentation, organizing your data into a framework that people can use. Then there's the practicing time, the revamping it, the massaging it, the updating it, the editing it. All of that should take about 30 hours, give or take, if you're going to give a 1-hour presentation. Kind of a rule of thumb there that I like to use. If I'm asked to speak for an hour, I'm going to probably have to map out about 30 hours to prepare to give that type of presentation or lecture. Did I mention practicing? This is probably one of the most important things you can do to prepare for any type of presentation. Again, whether you're going up in front of a board of directors to ask for money, if you're going to go speak at a conference, if you're going to teach a class to a bunch of 8th graders, whatever it is, you need to practice. Practice your presentation. Here's a quick tip that might help you out, because I have a lot of people say, when I practice my slides, for example, it's not the same as when I'm standing on the stage, because they look different. When you're sitting at your desk, looking at your screen, they're very close. You're in a nice, comfortable environment. Here's what I like people to do. You build your slides on your screen, then step back about 20 feet. Step away from your screen. Turn it around on your desk or whatever. Step back about 20 feet and then look at your screen. Can you see everything on there? Can you read the text that is on your screen? If you can't read it from 20 feet away, people in the audience won't be able to read it either. So just a quick tip there, when you're designing your slides, make sure that they're big enough and that text is large enough for everybody to see. Step back 20 feet, look at it, that'll help. Practice it too. I'm going to switch the camera around so you can see a little bit of me, and I'm going to talk about body language now, okay? We're going to flip this around here. I have a lot of people that ask me sometimes about what should I do when I'm speaking, when I'm engaging with people, when I'm talking to them. How can I be a little more impactful with my body language, with what I'm doing? First of all, you want to talk with your hands. A lot of us are hand talkers, some not so much. But again, speaking with your hands can be very powerful. We found through research that if you stand with your hands about this high, and you can't really see it, I'm going to bring them up a little bit, but usually at about waist height there, with your hands in front of you, your palms are up like this. This is an instinctive gesture that engenders trust. It's kind of hard to, can I step back a little bit? I'm going to step back a little. Usually down around here. Maybe you can't really see it as well, but if your hands are in front of you around waist high with your hands angled slightly like that and your palms up, this instinctively means people are going to trust you a little bit more. And if they trust you a little bit more, they're more willing to listen to what you have to say, and you have more credibility and believability. So again, hands. I'm a hand talker. I talk with my hands all the time. Not a problem. Another thing you need to focus on is eye contact. You need to look at the people you're talking to. If you're engaged with a small group, maybe possible investors, look at them. Talk to individuals in the room. Make eye contact with them. If you're talking to a large auditorium full of people, Make eye contact with people. Pick out several key individuals in the audience. Perhaps they're giving you positive, friendly feedback, and continue to talk to them, but scanning across the audience. Make sure you engage with everybody, because if you're not looking at them, you're not communicating effectively with them. They're looking at you, they're watching you. You need to watch them too. Also, by watching your audience, you're constantly pulling in additional information on whether or not they're understanding you. If you see a lot of perplexed looks in your audience, you're probably not doing a very good job of communicating what you want to get out to them. So you may have to readjust on the fly. Maybe you misjudged the knowledge level of your audience when you were preparing. Maybe you need to simplify it a little bit. Or maybe they look bored and you can up it a couple of notches on the technical side. If people are looking at their phones and not paying attention to you, you're losing your audience at that point. So engage with them, look at them, okay? It's okay to stand with a lectern in front of you. I know a lot of people like to do this when they're presenting, especially to a large group in an auditorium or something like that. The speaker will have a lectern, they'll have it there, a microphone and whatnot. One point on microphones, once they're set, don't touch them or grab them. It makes a lot of noise and can be very distracting for people. But I like to actually walk away from a lectern. You'll notice I'm using what's called a lavalier mic, a little mobile mic that clips on your belt. You can walk around. It's much more engaging for people if you actually step away from that lectern on the stage there and start walking around. People's eyes will follow you naturally, and as their eyes are following you, they're listening to what you're saying. They're much more engaged. When you're standing with that lectern in front of you and just reading your slides or clicking through them, you're not as dynamic, you're not as engaging, and people are not listening quite as closely. Also, the lectern is a barrier. So people aren't connecting with you on that one-on-one basis that you want them to do. I'm a big fan of walking away from the lectern and walking up on the stage. If possible, I actually like to walk through the audience. That really keeps people engaged. Not to the point where they have to turn around to see you, but I do like to walk in front of them and maybe up and down slightly through the aisles if it's a larger auditorium, just to keep them more engaged. So we've talked about hands, we've talked about walking, we've talked about how to stand. You want to stand up straight, don't slump, don't slouch. Be positive on this kind of stuff. I hear my mother to this day yelling at me, stand up straight, don't slouch. You want to do that too. It exudes confidence. If people feel you're confident, they believe you a little bit more. Let's go back to the slides now. And we're almost there. It's coming up. There it is. Another one of my pet peeves, laser pointers. We love our laser pointers. We love to point at little plot points and data things on the slides behind us. But here's what happens. If you're using a laser pointer, you have to turn around. If you turn around, you're not engaged with your audience. I've had people say, well, gee, how can I highlight this data if I can't point to it with my laser pointer? There are ways to bring those things out. You can actually have little bubbles coming out on your presentation that highlight certain sections of the slide. There are a lot of ways to do this. But again, if you're turning around, if you're using a laser pointer and turning around, you're losing part of your audience at that point. It also means that your visual support is not clear enough. So you should never use laser pointers. I just hate those things. I don't want to see anybody here use a laser pointer, okay? You don't need them. Better ways to do this, all right? Even if they're lasers on sharks, we can't have those, okay? What to wear? What do I wear when I'm speaking? The answer to that is the same answer to all of life's great questions. It depends. It depends on who you're speaking to. It depends on the venue. It depends on what they're wearing. So find out ahead of time. Is this a pretty formal group? Are you in DC talking to a bunch of politicians? Probably need to wear a suit. Are you out in Montana talking to a bunch of ranchers? Button-down shirt, jeans, and a pair of boots. Find out what your audience wears and go one step above that. Be comfortable. Comfortable shoes are good, especially if you're walking and standing for a length of time. But find out kind of what the audience is wearing, what the accepted norms are. I was doing a presentation in Hawaii, for example, and I almost got laughed off the stage because I wore a tie. People don't wear ties there for some reason. So find out what the local customs are, find out what the audience generally dresses to, and then dress appropriately. You'll notice, by the way, that the shirt I was wearing, and we'll come back to that in a couple of seconds here, is a very light blue color. That looks good in almost any lighting situation on camera. So if they're going to be filming something or taping it, that looks good with any skin tone, any color. You watch the politicians, they wear a lot of those light blue shirts when they're suits too. So wear what's appropriate to the venue and the audience. Find out ahead of time, okay? Did I mention practice? You need to practice. This is one of the most important things to do. Practice out your presentation in front of others if you can. I like to do it in front of a mirror. Oftentimes, I'm speaking at a conference in a hotel or something like that. In my room, I will stand, because every room in a hotel that I've ever been in has those big mirrors in the room. I'll stand in front of the mirror and then click through my presentation, going through it fully. Don't take any shortcuts. First of all, this really kind of gets it down so you have it down pat. You know this presentation. You could go walk out there if you practice it enough and do it without any visual support, because that's kind of the goal in a lot of this stuff. So you can really know the material. You also get a sense of flow and continuity. Sometimes I'll make a couple of last minute adjustments because I think, well, this slide goes better here, or this point would fit better over there. So practice it. Practice it in front of a mirror. Watch how you present it. Do you need to pause to make a point? Do you need to emphasize something? These things can be built in, and you can only do that if you're practicing this. Practice in front of others, practice in front of a mirror, and make the stage your own. What do I mean by that? This is a little trick I learned a long time ago where I would get into where I'm going to be speaking. Maybe it's a large venue of some kind. I will get in there ahead of time, whether it's a day before or the morning of when nobody else is in there, and I will get up on the stage where I'm going to be speaking. And then I'll just stand there for a moment. And I'll just visualize doing a successful presentation. I know it sounds crazy, but it'll make you feel better. It'll enhance your confidence in your ability to do this. They actually did some research about things like this, and they had 3 different groups they put together, just random people they pulled together. Probably they were, I'm guessing they were undergrads, because almost all research in human behavior involves undergrads, it seems like. And they had 3 different groups of them, 10 people in each team, 3 teams. And they had each team get together and shoot free throws in a basketball court. And they recorded how accurate they were. And these weren't basketball players, these are just folks, and they let them try it and recorded how accurate they were. Then they told them all, okay, here's what we're going to do. Group number 1, we're sending you home. You don't practice, you don't shoot free throws, you don't do anything. Group number 2, you're going to come back every day for 2 weeks, and you're going to shoot free throws for 20 minutes every day for the next 2 weeks. The third group, they told them this: we want you to spend 20 minutes every day sitting, visualizing shooting free throws successfully. That's all it is. Just visualize it. Sit almost like a meditation and visualize shooting these free throws. They did this for 2 weeks. Then they brought all 3 teams back again. What team do you think did the best? What do you think? Well, I'll tell you, it was actually the group that practiced, because there is no substitute for actually doing the practice. But the group that did the visualizations came very close to being almost as good as the ones who practice. So it actually does enhance our ability to do tasks and feel comfortable doing them. So get on the stage if you can. Take a few moments, just stand there, close your eyes, soak it all in, and visualize doing a successful presentation, and you'll do a better job. It'll help, trust me. Do it all the time. And I want to mention it's okay to be afraid. Sometimes speaking in front of groups, speaking to other people can be very terrifying for people. Most people are not natural public speakers. It takes a lot of practice and time. I'll tell you a little story about a friend of mine. His name is Dave. He's an agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, an FBI agent here in downtown Chicago. Dave is a real kind of a badass kind of guy. He got his career, started out as an Army Ranger, then worked executive protection in the Middle East for the State Department for many years in many horrible situations. Now he's an FBI agent. And he's not the kind that sits around looking at people's tax returns. He's the guy that kicks in the door and takes down the bad guys. So he's used to stressful situations, right? He calls me up a couple of years ago, and he says, Chris, I got a question for you. And I could hear a little bit of fear in his voice, a little apprehension. I'm like, yeah, what's going on, Dave? He goes, you teach people how to do presentations and public speaking sometimes, right? I go, yeah, what's going on? And here I'm thinking maybe he's got to go up to the Hoover building and talk to a bunch of high-level FBI agents, or maybe even to the White House or something. I said, yeah, tell me about your audience. Tell me a little bit of who you're going to be speaking to. And he goes, I got to be talking to my daughter's third grade class, and I'm terrified of this. So even somebody like that can be terrified of public speaking. And third graders can be quite terrifying, actually. So it's okay to be afraid, but there's some things you can do to enhance your level of comfort, to enhance your sense of confidence, and to reduce your stress. And we found Amy Cuddy's done some great research in this out of Harvard, that your posture can actually improve your confidence. We are influenced how we feel and think about things by our actual physical body and how we stand and our posture and things like that. So let's bring the camera back to me real quick. I want to show you a couple things that are really kind of interesting, okay? Part of Cuddy's research was looking at visually impaired athletes. And she said that people that were blind from birth, when they competed in various competitions, physical competitions, races, things like that, when they won, they would throw their hands up like this. Now, these are people that have never seen another human being do this, but it's this universal gesture of success, or I've done something well. I won, so to speak. And I remember seeing this. I was the communication director for Olympic security in 2002 in Salt Lake City, and we also had the Paralympics there, and I saw athletes do these kinds of motions, and I never put two and two together until I read Amy Cuddy's book on this. What we're finding, I guess, is that our stance, our posture, can affect how we feel about things. And so there are things called power poses I want to mention. So if you're feeling a little nervous about something, if you're not sure about something, if you do a power pose, this will make you feel more confident. The body will react to the pose. One of the power poses, kind of funny, they call it the Wonder Woman pose. If you stand with your hands on your hips like this, your legs spread, you're taking up space. This is a very powerful pose. And if you stand like this for a minute or so, you will feel more confident. You'll feel better about what's going on. And confidence is important when you're speaking, giving a presentation. Now, you're going to look kind of goofy when you're doing it. So maybe you go find a bathroom, stand in the stall like this for a while, but you will come out feeling better about it. Or you can do the arms up stance or whatever the case may be. But if you do that ahead of time, that will help you feel a little bit better, a little more confident, lowers your stress levels. Another way to lower stress levels is a breathing technique I learned from a Dr. Tom Hoseman, who was the chair of psychology at Chippenberg University. He did some early work on stress and first responders and post-traumatic stress disorder and things like that. And so he taught me how to do some breathing exercises if you feel stressed or nervous. And this is a very simple one you can do to reduce anxiety levels and make you feel a little bit calmer before you go out and speak to a large group. This is how it works. You breathe in through your nose to a very slow count of 10, and you do diaphragmatic breathing. You actually extend your stomach out and you do a very deep breath in slowly through your nose to a count of 10. You hold it for a count of 10 and then release it through your mouth to a count of 10. So you do that maybe 2-3 times and you'll feel it. You will feel a little bit calmer, a little bit better about things. If you have teenagers, you'll end up doing this a lot. I know I used to too. So those are little things that you can do to help increase your confidence and make you feel a little less stressed about public speaking. Let's go back to the slides now. Okay, I wanted to mention stories too. Everybody loves a good story, right? Stories are just wired into our DNA. We love this stuff. The human brain is actually hardwired to respond to a story. We found that human beings take in information a couple of different ways. One is paradigmatic, that's facts and figures, numbers, things like that. The other is narrative in the form of a story. And we found that people not only understand information better, but they retain it longer if it's presented in a story or some element of a story. Now, when you're telling a story, I'm not saying you got to tell your life story, but there are things that can help you to communicate your science, your technology, what you want people to understand. And there are ways to do this because we were really interested in basically 3 types of stories. One is about practical applications of things. That's especially true when it comes to any type of technological advancement. We love to know the technology and how that will make our lives better at a practical level. That's one way. We also love human communication, human stories, stories about maybe why we decided to go into this. What is it that makes us connect to other human beings? Something that inspired us to follow this research. Uh, I was mentioning earlier, I was one of our researchers here at Argonne is a neuroscientist. I think he's the first neuroscientist at any of the national laboratories. And he's a wonderful guy. He's great. His research is amazing. But a story he was telling me really resonated with me about his culture and his background and how proud he is of it. There's another one of the researchers here was telling me about her early days with her father and how he inspired her to become a physicist. And it was all about the sense of wonder that she had about the universe. And that's another thing that really helps people with stories is that sense of wonder. That's what people are interested in. So these are elements of stories that can really help you to communicate what you're trying to get across. Telling stories. Another challenge we have many times when we're putting together a presentation is we know a lot of stuff. I call it the curse of too much information. And we love to show off how smart we are by putting every little fact and figure and background piece into our presentation, when many times people don't really need it. They just want to know the basics of what you're trying to communicate and what's in it for them. So paring it down, keeping it short, keeping your presentation to the allotted time. How many times have you been at a conference where the speakers go over their time allotment? They're going way over, they're talking too much. Not only is that a problem for the listeners, the people, the audience that you're trying to communicate with, but it's very disrespectful to folks that are following you because now they have less time to communicate their information. So find out how much time you have to talk. I like to actually keep it shorter than that. If I'm told I've got a half an hour to give a presentation, I'll plan and practice to make sure I'm stopping around 22, 23 minutes, allowing time for questions or the occasional side story that needs to come up or something like that. So plan to go a little bit shorter than the time they allot to you, okay? You want to keep it short. Now I want to talk about the visuals, okay? PowerPoint. PowerPoint is not evil. PowerPoint is not bad. There are some groups that blame the crash on the shuttle Challenger and PowerPoint. They have people that say PowerPoint is evil and will result in the downfall of civilization as we know it. I don't believe that. PowerPoint is just a tool, okay? Unfortunately, PowerPoint is laid out to make you fail. When you click open a new PowerPoint presentation, this is what you see, right? It's a place to put a title and a whole bunch of bullet points. You don't have to do it that way. There are other ways to present your information. So we're going to cover some things about the visual aspects of your presentation, okay, to help you tell those stories a little bit better. And I want to emphasize this. The slides are just an aid. They're not a crutch, okay? They're there to help you to tell the story, not to tell the story. And if people are staring at your slides, because they are too hard to read or they can't understand them, they're not listening to you. If they're trying to figure out what's on your slide, they're not listening to what you're saying. And if you take nothing else away today from this presentation that I'm giving you, nothing else at all, this is the most important thing for you to remember. You are the presentation. I want to say that again. You are the presentation. The slides, the supporting material, any of that stuff, that backs up what you are saying because you are the presentation. All right, so I'm going to go over some of the classic blunders that happen when people are putting together PowerPoint slides to support their presentation. Let's take a look at the classic mistakes that people make, okay? The first blunder here is too much information packed into the slide. Don't spoon feed them this stuff. You don't have to give them densely packed slides. Again, these are just an aid to help you communicate what you're trying to point out, okay? I'm going to give you a couple examples here I found online. And by the way, if you're going to give them this kind of information, just write it up in a report and hand it to them, okay? Because they can read it at their leisure at that point. Here's an example, a slide I found, came from a conference, very densely packed information. Who has time to read this? Who can read this? Nobody. So you don't want to do something like that. Here's another example I found online of a slide that's way too densely packed with information. I think the actual title on this slide is 9 things successful people do differently. Obviously, one of them is not knowing how to use PowerPoint. So again, don't pack your slides with too much information. It just doesn't work. Another point here, another one of the classic blunders, Size matters. If you're going to show something on your slide, actually show it. We're talking about charts or figures or graphs or things like that. Make sure people can read it and it's legible from a distance, okay, on the slide. Here's another example I found online. Somebody put together a little pie chart here. Why is it so small? You could fill up the entire page with that and make it legible. Don't do that. Make sure people can see it, okay? Here's another slide I found too. This is actually a graph of graphs. Again, I'm not sure why there's no way to read this thing. So why bother showing it? If you can't read it, if it's not helping, why bother show it, okay? Okay, and don't just read your slides. I've seen this plenty of times too. People get up there and they just read their slides verbatim, okay? You know what I'm talking about here. These are the people who basically just read every one of the bullet points they put on their slide without going on and on. And they don't bother actually telling you what they really think or what the information is because they haven't taken the time to prepare or to practice their presentation. So you don't want to be one of these people, okay? Don't just read your bullet points. You are the presentation. There should be one or two things on there to help highlight what you're talking about. So here's my rule of thumb. When it comes to bullet points, 3 to 6 per slide, no more. Keep it simple. 1, 2, 3 is my favorite. If you got to go up to 6, maybe I understand that. I had a boss who used to cram like 30 plus bullet points onto his slides. And I'd look at him and say, do the slides cost extra money if you add more? Break it up. It's okay. If you've got to show those things, show them, but you can put more slides in there because it's easier to read and people to digest that way. Here's an example again, FEMA. I love pulling examples from FEMA. I used to work a lot with them. Way too many bullet points, way too dense of their information there. What's the point? Nobody can really read this. And again, as the audience is trying to read the slide, they're not listening to what you're saying. Don't forget to spell check. No matter how many degrees you have, no many letters they have behind your name, if you've got spelling errors in your presentation, you're going to look like you're dumb as a bag of hammers. So make sure you spell check it. And not just spell check, because sometimes words are spelled correctly, but they mean different things. Years ago, I used to be the director of communication for the Utah Department of Public Safety. You'd be amazed at how many times the L was left out of public by accident. Spell check doesn't catch that one. So make sure you go over your slides. Make sure maybe somebody else takes a look at your slides too for those types of mistakes, okay? Spell check everything. And I want to mention visuals. Good visuals can really help bring out a story, to bring out the information you're trying to communicate, to help people understand what you want to get them to understand, okay? There's lots of places to get good visuals, okay? You can go to Corbis, iStock Photo, 123RF, Comfight. There's lots of sources where you can get this stuff. You don't have to worry about copyright because you've purchased it. And it's not expensive. Some of these places I spend like 25 cents per image, and then it's mine to use for as long as I want. And so that way you don't have to worry about copyright or any problems down the road. You have those images. You can use those. They're yours, and they cost you almost nothing, okay? And by the way, if you're still using Microsoft Clip Art, you might as well just give up because you're never gonna be successful. So stay away from that stuff. But if you are using stock photos, here's something I've noticed over the years. The people in stock photos, when you buy these things and use them, are always very thin, very pretty, and very young. I don't know if where you're at is like Argonne, but the people here at Argonne are not young, we're not pretty, and we're definitely not thin. So if you're going to use the stock photos, that's okay, use them, but it's okay to have a little fun with them too. You can change them up. Again, you've purchased it, it's yours. You can get somebody to Photoshop it or you can alter it yourself. Don't be afraid to change the photos to make them fit what you're trying to communicate, okay? Real estate. What I mean by that is the actual slide area. Don't be afraid to use the whole area. There's a white space you can use in the middle of it to give it some emphasis and whatnot, but don't be afraid to use all of the space that you have available for you. But again, make sure you're not just packing it full of data. Make sure it's easy to read from a distance, that everybody can see this stuff, okay? And I want to make sure that your slides are covered in CRAP. Okay, now that I have your attention, let me tell you what CRAP is, okay? It's an acronym meaning contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. These are design basics. These will help you to have successful creative visuals that support what you're talking about. I do have a disclaimer. Crap doesn't make perfect presentations. I will tell you some crap's better than no crap. And I'm not an expert, but I know crap when I see it, okay? And there is a book that may help you. I found very helpful. It's called The Non-Designer's Design Book by Robin Williams. And no, it's not that Robin Williams, okay? Good book. I don't get any money out of it, but I've used it very successfully for myself. Now, here's some things that might help you, okay? I want to talk about contrast first. I've seen this happen time and time again. What do I mean by contrast? That means making sure light and dark stand out, okay? This is much better. I'm showing you some examples right now. You want to have high contrast. You don't know what the lighting situation is going to be like where you're presenting sometimes. High contrast is always easier to read. I prefer very light backgrounds and very dark text to make sure people can see it, okay? You want to make sure you repeat elements. Repeat elements. Use the same font. Use the same colors over and over again. Repetition of elements can help. Otherwise, people will be so focused on what's wrong with it, they're not really listening to what you're saying. So again, you'll notice now we're repeating elements. We're using the same font, the same style of box. We're putting it all together and using those same elements over and over again. Repeat elements. That helps to communicate more effectively. You want to make sure things are aligned on screen. So make sure they're all lined up nicely, neatly, evenly spaced. There are functions in PowerPoint that allow you to do this automatically. And proximity. What I mean by proximity is like things go together. So if something is similar to something else, try and group them together like this. So make sure that like things are grouped together. It makes it easier for people to see and understand when they're looking at it on the screen. Now here's a few slides I found looking around online that really could have benefited from some crap, okay? Here's one somebody put together on their sales trip to Beijing. I have no idea what they were trying to communicate on this slide. This is actually probably one of the worst slides I've ever found. It's got pretty much every different font and little tiny pictures that mean nothing to me. I don't know what that's about here. This is not a terrible slide, but you'll look again that the contrast is pretty low. It's hard to read the text, and the image is kind of buried behind it. So I'm not really sure it's very effective at that point. Here's another one. This actually was from a FEMA presentation that I actually got to be part of witnessing one time. This could have been a very powerful image. You look at the picture there in the foreground. There was some horrible crash. You see people in the front. Somebody's holding a baby. This could have been great, but they've buried it behind text, and the text doesn't have enough of a contrast to make it easily readable. I'll call your attention to the very last bullet point on here. Call for psychiatric help. I think if you look at the slide long enough, you might need it, okay? This one I pulled up. Again, there's a lot of images and a lot of problems with this slide. First of all, the spacing and the kerning of the lettering makes it very difficult to read. You've got different fonts there. The thing I found absolutely most disturbing about this slide was the fact that this guy actually is a lung cancer surgeon, and he's pausing in the middle of cracking someone's chest open to do a selfie. I don't want my surgeon to take selfies while I'm opened up on the table there. I just thought that was disturbing in so many ways there. Another slide, again, densely packed with graphs and numbers. Nobody can read this thing. Absolute waste of space on a slide right there. Another example from FEMA. I pulled a lot from FEMA. I hope nobody from FEMA's on the call today. Again, mixed up fonts, a strange, weird picture that's been squished down. I'll call your attention again to the third bullet point. When people think of you, do they salivate? I'm not sure where they're going on this one. A little weird there. Here's another slide that we pulled together from the EPA. Again, way too much data in there. I can't read any of that stuff from where I'm sitting in the audience, okay? Another great slide here having to do with an org chart for the military. That would be a tough one to follow. I think Argonne's organized similar to that too. I'm not sure. And my all-time favorite bad slide is this one. I don't know, anybody could read this sitting in the audience, okay? Unfortunately, somebody from Argonne was involved in creating this. I'm not going to point fingers or point out the division that was involved in this. But again, horrible slide. Nobody could read this sitting in the audience, okay? So use crap. If you do, your slides will be good. You'll be a winner, okay? Now, there are 3 shortcuts to great slide design, very briefly here. The first is buy it. Invest in professional images, typeface. It can really set you apart. make sure people are really interested in what you're saying, make sure you're very successful in communicating what you're trying to communicate, okay? Steal it. Yes, that's okay. We won't tell anybody. If you see a style of presentation or a style of slide that you like, take it and make it your own. Now, don't just steal it exactly, but you can adapt your information to kind of fit in with that style if you like it. It's okay, but make it your own. Take the idea and run with it, make it your own. Of course, you can also hire somebody too. There are many talented people out there, many designers. Argonne has an entire group that does nothing but graphic design and helps people to put together great presentations for them. So I'm sure your organization probably has that too, or there's some starving artist at an art school somewhere that might be able to help you out too. But not a bad idea to have somebody professional look at this stuff too. It's an important presentation. Couldn't hurt, okay? So what did we learn today? You are the presentation. Know your audience and know the goal. Why are you speaking to them? You need to practice your presentation. And of course, PowerPoint is not evil, but bad presentations are evil. Do we have any questions? I got about 15 minutes left if I understand it right. Anybody got any questions?
The first thing I'd like to do is thank Chris. That was an excellent presentation. I had fun seeing it. I hope the rest of the gang did too. Folks, feel free to throw your questions out there about your personal presentations. If you have questions about what Chris covered today, I mean, really, he's here to help. Presentations is a subject that we can all improve on. So go ahead and get specific if you want.
Yeah, I'm from the government. I'm here to help.
So the rule of thumb about 30 hours of preparation for a 1-hour presentation really seems painful to me. Do you have any suggestions about where one could cut corners or tricks for saving time to cut down on that number?
Well, you get what you pay for. You may remember NASA many years ago had the philosophy of what they called faster, cheaper, better, and then a shuttle blew up. So again, if it's an important presentation, if something big is riding on this thing, you don't want to cut corners on it. If it's a presentation you've done many times, maybe you've done several incarnations of it, that's when you can start peeling back a little bit. I'd still practice it one more time, dust it off, take it for a test drive, but you might not need to go back and redo all of the slides or anything like that. So that's when you get into less time needed. But starting from scratch, a brand new presentation on a brand new topic, I probably wouldn't cut corners on it. It's better to go ahead and take that extra time, plan it out. You don't have to do it all in one chunk, obviously, but unless you're a professional speaker who does this on a daily basis, it's better to err on the side of caution. Again, if you hire somebody to help with your slides, that takes some of the time off of you. They're doing time, 30 hours total of effort, I would say. And again, that's kind of a rule of thumb. It could be a little less, could be a little more, depending on your comfort level, your knowledge base, things like that. But I tend to want to err on the side of caution, especially on something important. When you're going up maybe in front of a group or you're competing for funding from a DOE source or something like that, where maybe other labs or other groups are coming in and trying to get funded. We just did this big ideas presentation not too long ago at a conference in, I think it was California, but I could be mistaken. So especially in those areas, you want to practice a lot more. But I'm talking 30 hours of person effort to do this. If you've got other people helping you, that counts into that too. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
I have a question. If I have a 15 minutes presentation time, so how many slides will be good? So do you have any rule of thumb?
There are people that say, one slide per minute. You may have noticed my style moves a little faster. I click through my slides pretty fast. It's not about the number of slides. It's about practicing your presentation to make sure you hit the time mark. So if they're giving you 15 minutes, plan for 12, practice for 12, but the number of slides is going to be depending on how fast you talk, how much information you put on them. You might spend 3 minutes on one slide and 30 seconds on another. It depends on what you're trying to communicate and what type of information you're putting on your slide. One of the things that's helpful, and I mentioned how you are the presentation, you're going to have your own style of speaking. You're going to have the way that you talk, your pacing, how you interact with the audience, how fast you move, things like that. There's a wonderful book, by the way, called The Geography of Time and how different cultures perceive and move through time differently. But some of it is dependent on you. So I don't think there's a hard and fast rule of number of slides per minute. It's more about practicing to make sure you're hitting the mark, and then the number of slides is the number of slides you need to communicate effectively. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Speaking of pacing yourself on a presentation, oftentimes how fast or how slow you should speak. Because if you speak too fast, the audience doesn't understand you. If you speak too slow, you're gonna bore them to death.
That's a really good question. Human beings, by their very nature, when they get nervous, a couple of things happen. We tend to talk faster, and our voice goes up an octave, sometimes more. We start talking a little higher because we're nervous or excited. So this is again where practice helps. And different areas of the country have a different pacing of how they communicate. For example, if I'm up in Boston or New York, I can talk at a pretty fast rate, and that's just normal for them. When I go to Alabama in the deep South, and I've been accused of this, I have to slow myself down. Otherwise, they won't follow what I'm saying. I did a presentation down there one time, and a woman raised her hand and said, y'all talk fast. So it depends on the audience again, who you're speaking to. But again, probably it's better to err on the side of talking a little bit slower. And that comes again from confidence, from practicing. And so slow yourself down. Don't try and cram so much information in there. And another common error that people make is when they're doing their presentation and maybe they realize they start running out of time, maybe they're going a little longer, they'll start talking really fast and they'll start clicking through the slides because they want to get through everything really, really fast. Again, that's where practice comes in. Practice your presentation, practice the amount of time it takes for you to get to what you want to communicate. And that way you'll know how much information. So be yourself, use the pacing that you're comfortable with, but err on the side of maybe a little bit slower because we generally tend to speak a little faster when we're nervous. So just calm yourself down, maybe do a breathing exercise, and then talk at a nice, even pacing. That'll probably help the most. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, in that case, we'll wrap up today's J. Caesar webinar. I want to thank Chris Kramer again. Thank you a lot. Great job today. I also want to thank all of you for attending today's J. Caesar webinar. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you had some fun. I know I thought it was pretty funny. Great time. If you have any additional questions that you think of for Chris Kramer, or if you have any additional questions or suggestions to me, feel free to email jcaesarops@anl.gov, and I'd be happy to get to those as quickly as possible. So thanks again, and see you same time, same place in 2 weeks.